Welcome to the Love Your Story podcast. I'm your host, Lori Lee, and today we are talking about the complexity and balance of interacting with and influencing our adult children. My guests today are Emily and Erik Orton. You'll remember them from episode 133, 7 at Sea, where we talked about the year that they took their 5 kids and lived on a sailboat. This was one of my all-time favorite episodes because I so loved the things that Erik and Emily shared. There were so many great thought-provoking ideas of how to intentionally live and make things happen, which is what we're all about here on Love Your Story. So I'm very excited to have them back on the show. But I'm also excited because I'm personally having a hard time getting on the board of directors for my adult kids. Or in other words, I am not having a great deal of success having any influence with my adult children. How do they still think I have nothing to share with them? What am I doing wrong? So stay tuned as we get to talk shop with Erik and Emily as they share their expertise that they have developed and that they share through their business now called The Awesome Factory. Stories are our lives in language. Welcome to the Love Your Story podcast. I'm Lori Lee, and I'm excited for our future together of telling stories, evaluating our own stories, and lifting ourselves and others to greater places because of our control over our stories. This podcast is about empowerment and giving you, the listener, ideas to work with in making your stories work for you. Story power serves you best when you know how to use it. Emily and Erik Orton. Erik is an Emmy Award-winning writer and producer. Emily is an educator, author, and public speaker. Their life design framework mutes fear and accelerates growth. That's what they're all about. And they are the parents of 5 kids that were raised in Manhattan, where Erik worked on such shows as Wicked and Les Mis and Phantom of the Opera, all the big ones. When their kids were 6 to 16 years old, they bootstrapped life aboard a fixer-upper sailboat in the Caribbean. They sailed as a family from St. Martin back to New York City. That's kind of what we talked about a lot on episode 133. If you didn't hear that episode, go back and grab it. It's so good. And their memoir about the experience is called 7 at Sea. And that's New York Times top 10 travel books. So that's a keeper too. And after life on this boat, they continued to travel the world with their children through Europe, the South Pacific, Africa, across North and South America in planes and trains and boats and vans. And they're going to tell us a little bit about that. They are the co-founders, like I just mentioned, of The Awesome Factory, where they're coaching. And they have a travel adventure company where they lead retreats and take people on sailing adventures all over the world. And they'll tell us a little about that too. Erik and Emily, welcome back to the Love Your Story podcast.
Thank you, Lori. It's so great to be with you again. Exciting topic.
Yeah, thanks for having us back on.
So let's start with your story. That introduction gave everyone a quick look at the adventures of your past decade, but I'd love to have you share some of the highlights that you've had with your family, where you've been in these last few years.
I would say for me, it all started with a piece of paper with 100 squares on it. When our kids were really little, I made a 100-year grid and I marked 1 year for every year of my life, just fingers crossed I'll live to 100. And then I highlighted the years that from when our first child was born and when we thought our last child might leave, which she may never leave. She has Down syndrome. And so that changed our vision of the future to kind of make it a little less clear. Nevertheless, having that chart posted inside my closet for all those years, the reason I did that was to keep in mind the time frame that I would have with them under my roof. And then I also wrote out a vision of like what I hoped our relationships would be like in 25 years. And so a lot of the decisions we made, like the decision to move aboard a sailboat, for me, it was strongly motivated by that vision of having a connection and doing things together that were unique to us, kind of like having inside jokes. Like we were going to have these experiences that would really forge those relationships. So then I just want to acknowledge at the outset that well, it's really helpful to have a vision for what you want instead of just saying, I don't like what's happening right now, because then that's something we can proactively move towards. There are these other humans that get to make their own choices. And so there might be something maybe we talk about later about the letting go, our expectations to improve our relationships. And I'm not sure. I'm just going to plant that seed and see if we come back to it and if anything grows. But that was kind of the impetus for this vision I had of our relationship, was the impetus for some of these journeys. And with them, I think I'll say one of my favorite things, in addition to living on the sailboat, one of the things we did together, standing on top of the Acropolis with our kids, like I was completely geeking out because 6th grade me could not believe that I was getting that same dust on my feet. And of course, I just put all of that onto my kids. They read books about the Greek characters and the Greek gods. And anyway,
was this after the sailing? Was this after the sailing?
After. Yeah. This was after the sailing. So after the sailing, this is the part where you said we traveled to all these different countries. Yes. So that was a highlight for me. And then going with them to the Vatican Library. For me, honestly, every time we were going to like historic sites or libraries around the world, which was definitely part of our rhythm, that was so cool. And we got to go to the Vatican Library. We got a private tour because of the connection that Erik had. And she opened up this book that was just centuries old, made on pig skin, and read to us in Latin that said, "No learning is wasted." And maybe that's a helpful tip for life and tip for parents at any age as well. But I loved that. And then I think it was really special for me when we spent some time in New Zealand we did something called farm sitting, which is where people who run a farm, they want to leave. And so they say, well, you could stay here for free as long as you take care of our animals, and they set you up for success and then they take off. And again, it was such an incredible experience for our kids who grew up in a city to have such an intense hands-on experience, feeding cows and rounding up. I think one place we had like 12 dogs that we were caring for, as well as like 30 head of cattle and 10 horses and some donkeys and a pig and, cats and chickens. And anyway, it was pretty intense, and we got to see cows born, and we even had one that we had to shoot. Anyway, it was just mainly it was just like going through all of these experiences together in context with our kids as part of our kind of trying to build in connection. And I think part of it for me, and I will stop talking in a second because Erik has so much to share. I'm sorry. Part of it for me is that I noticed in my family growing up that there was one thing that was really important to my parents. And that was basically the thing that we focused on all the time. And that was our faith. And as we grew into adults, everybody didn't continue to share that same faith. And it really kind of opened my eyes to recognize I want to have multiple touch points with my kids. I don't want to be just connected about one thing or two things. I want to have lots of different experiences. I want to have read the same books, seen the same movies, visited the same places. And
what I hear you saying is building relationship, which is key. I mean, that seems obvious, but you build relationship not through telling people to do their chores every day. You build relationship by going out and doing things and experiencing the world together. So that's lovely. And I also really love that point of creating a multidimensional relationship so that, maybe when you're having a hard time in one area, another area is strong for you. Erik, what about you? Mm-hmm. What kind of things have put you on your children's board of directors? Let's start with that, and then you can teach us how to do it.
Well, I think you're saying something really, really wise there. I like that term that you came with, like a multi-dimensional or multifaceted relationship, because I would describe our relationship with our kids as multifaceted. And I think that comes from, yes, I believe in kids doing chores. And I think
I do too. I just spend all my time talking to them about it. That's why I'm like, it's got to be more than that.
What I think creates a relationship between any two people is overcoming challenges together, period. That's how I bond with, you can bond with coworkers that way. You can bond with your spouse that way, with your kids. When you are overcoming a challenge together, you
So true.
Whether you like it or not, you're going to connect, you're going to bond. And so I think if anything, Emily and I have had a lot of fun, overcoming challenges as a family. And some of them have been thrust upon us, just external circumstances. And some of them we've chosen deliberately, like living on a sailboat. That's a very obvious example. And we went into that together. It took us a while to get on the same page, to all choose that adventure. And we came out stronger, more unified, galvanized as a family on the other side. I think other examples might be, we love to play music together. And sometimes we will, we're getting ready to play at a street fair or a Christmas concert or something. And there's a little bit of tension in the air as you're rehearsing and somebody's not getting something right, but you pull together. And then you have that moment where you go on stage and you play and you have a great time and the audience enjoys it and applauds. And you can't help but come off that stage not more connected than you were before.
I really like that point a lot, because as you're saying that, I'm kind of reflecting back on some of the challenges that right now my son needs to get a car. And we've been working on how to make that happen for him. And I've noticed that since we've been working on solving that problem for him, that he's opened up a little. And, and there was relationship there, and he was grateful for that help. And anyway, so I really like what you're saying. That's connecting with me.
And so as we've chosen adventures for ourselves and brought our kids along, we've been in situations where we've just had to figure things out together. Like Emily was talking about farm sitting in New Zealand. We were there in the spring and we're watching calves being born, lambs being born. And we don't know what to do, but the animals do. But we're able to watch them, and we're like discovering something together, and that connects us. And then one of the cattle got sick, and we had to figure out, well, this cow is suffering. It's going to die. We conferred with the neighbor farmer. He's like, yeah, this is not good. You should have somebody come over and put her down and take her away. And to just go through that together. And on the one hand, our son was probably the most present for these moments. Him seeing a calf being born on one end of the farm, and then another day going to the other end of the farm and seeing that we have to put this other cow down, shoot it, and then deal with the carcass. A lot of things got real for him, both life and death. And he got to see, he would play shooter video games up until that point. And I think after that, he was off it. He's like, once he saw a gun in real life and what it did, he's like, it wasn't fun and games for him anymore. And that wasn't the point. The moral of the story is not to say this is how you wean your kids off of video games, but just that we went through meaningful, momentous experiences together with our son. We saw and experienced things, and that connected us. And now we can talk about all kinds of things because we have a variety of experiences together. And it's not just do your homework, make sure you do your chores, get out the door, you're late for school, get dressed for church, things like that. We're not just a nag. We're fellow travelers. And
do your kids want to do things with you? Like, is it hard to do things with them once they get older and get into that space of you're not cool?
Emily, you should take this one. We had our house full of our kids last week.
Oh, gosh. Well, they do want to do things with us, but they don't want to do everything with us. And I think one of the secret, I don't think it's a weapon, but one like the secret sauce is that throughout the parenting process, and I think you can introduce this at any point if you're sincere, we ask them for feedback. We ask them, what do you want more of from me? What do you want less of from me? A lot of times I imagined what they wanted from me as a mother, and it was so much. What I imagined was far more than what they actually wanted to feel loved and supported. And so when I asked them directly, like, what do you need from me to feel loved and supported? What they wanted was so small in comparison. It actually like freed up all of this energy that they don't need me at every single thing.
Interesting.
And so I'll ask, we have right now, I just want to like fill in the blanks here. Since the time we lived on the sailboat, we had the 5 kids all at home with us. We now have 2 kids at home. Last year in 2023, we had 2 daughters get married, and we had 1 daughter move to Minneapolis with a startup. And our son turned 18, and we are now expecting our first grandchild in the fall. So we've definitely shifted, right? Because it's only our daughter with Down syndrome, who's 16 years old, who is really home with us now. And so we have fully, and she may or may not always be there. We are in an unusual situation where 4 of our 5 kids actually, are really near to us. 2 of them are in the house and 2 are nearby. We now have added sons-in-law, and we've tried to be intentional and deliberate about that dynamic as well. And we know, the way to our children's heart is going to be through always seeing the best in their chosen partners and giving them all the privacy they need. And I was on a walk with Erik the other day, and I said, I was thinking about some things that one of our married kids is facing right now. And I said, and I was like starting to come up with solutions and starting to like naturally solve these problems in my head. And I said, and I realized these are not my problems. It's not my business. And I can take that off my plate. I can think about other things because I fully trust, this is however they decide to handle it. These are their lessons. And I'm just here to say, I love you. I believe in you. You've got what it takes. And whenever they do choose to spend time with us, we are always really grateful. We love to have you here. We got some really good advice that we should take every opportunity to let not only our kids, but also the partners that they choose, that we're proud of them.
Yes. And I know there's a lot to talk about on this subject. Let's jump right into, how do you get on your adult kids board of directors? I believe, obviously you're throwing out some things. You look at the best in their spouses, you look at the best for them, you believe in them, that kind of thing. But let's kind of summarize, where do you think you start with this? What are some pointers? What is the board of directors?
Okay, well, first of all, I think when your kids become adults, you're no longer in the role of telling them what to do. You don't control their schedule. You have less and less control over their choices. You legally have, less say over their lives. And so I think some of it is just societal, and some of it's actually just a matter of fact, they're on their own, they're independent. And so we shift into a different role as our kids get older. And I think the best thing we can do for our young kids and our adult kids is to just continue to develop and grow ourselves as their parents. Because if we're growing, if we're learning, if we're trying new things, if we're improving, then I think a couple things happen. I think our kids see somebody that they admire and they respect, and that's who we go to for advice. If somebody's on the decline, if they're bumbling this and that could just be in a certain area, we're not going to go to the person that's having a struggle to get advice in a certain area. If they're having trouble with their finances, that's not who we go to for financial advice. If somebody's having a lot of success in their finances, that's who we go to. And so as long as we're growing and improving ourselves as their parents, as individuals, then we naturally, I think, step into that role. It doesn't mean that we need to be admirable in every area of our lives. It doesn't mean we need to be experts or position ourselves as experts, because that's not true. I think what kids really need to see are people who are striving. And there's a lot of respect for people who are trying, even if they're not succeeding. My kids have watched me struggle and strive at so many things and not get to where I want to go. But I feel that they've told me they respect me because they see the effort.
Which I think is so key, because that is what life is made of. On social media, so often they don't see that behind the scenes. They just see people having successes. And so then when their life actually requires getting down and dirty to make things happen, all that effort, and if they haven't seen that anywhere else, then it feels like they should give up, or life isn't fair, or, any of those mindsets that haven't been serving our kids in the last decades. So no, I think that's just real wisdom, really put well. You shared one of the key things that you think kids need in that workshop I attended with you was that they need to know that we believe in them. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I stole this out of the first page, or the introduction of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he talks about his own son who was struggling playing baseball, t-ball, something like that. And he was kind of the awkward kid that was always whiffing at bat and dropping, and they would try to pump him up and cheer for him. And then he realized, most importantly, we need to believe in our son. Everything else is going to ring hollow if I don't sincerely believe in my children. And I think this can be tricky because we can see our kids, and anybody can look at us and see all of our faults, all of our failings, and find a lot of reasons to not believe in us. I think the best way to go about this, in my opinion, is to trust what I'm going to call an underlying divine nature. At our core, we have, each of us, something in us that represents our true potential. And every single one of us is falling short of that. Every single one, certainly me. But I think that if we can truly see each other and believe that there is a seed of greatness within us, and we nurture that, whether we're living up to it or not, just say, hey, I know you can still love your kid and say, hey, I don't think it's great that you're doing drugs. I don't think it's great that you're failing out of your classes. I don't think it's great that you need to take a shower, whatever it is. We can see all those things and just say, hey, I know your best self, and your best self is, I believe in your best self. And we can kind of call them, I like to say, inviting them into a better story. I know that you're a hero. I want to call you into your hero's journey. And so I guess that's how I would say we can believe in them sincerely, even if they may not be showing lots of evidence of success.
I love that. So can you give us some hands-on examples of what it looks like to deal with adult kids and some of the questions they might have? What's some of the verbiage that we could use that you've had positive experience with? That could be either of you.
Oh, well, Erik may answer this better. I might not remember all 6 parts of this just off the top of my head here, but one of the things that we hear a lot from parents is, why, don't my kids take my advice? And so one of the main things that we learned really early is to, never give unsolicited advice. Just like a lot of people have on their front door, like no solicitors. You can just assume that sign is on your child's forehead. Like, no solicitors, please. Seriously, don't make it weird. There are different signs. But if they are willing to share a struggle that they're having with you, like, recognize that as a bid for connection, and recognize it with appreciation, and compliment their willingness to share, their humility, their vulnerability, their honesty, whatever it might be. Just like, thank you so much for trusting me with this. And then you can pivot into, I have some experience, or I have some thoughts or ideas about what might make this easier for you. Would you like to hear them? And if they say, no, I just wanted to share, I'll figure it out. Great. That's the end of that interaction, as far as that concern goes. But if they say, yes, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then you can give them, and then they still have the decision of whether they're going to try out your advice first, second, or fifth, or if they're still going to try to figure it out on their own. But that is sort of the basic arc that we have found is most useful just with other humans in general. We don't find them usually being like, wow, thank you so much for dumping all of your unasked for wisdom on my doorstep. I'll get right to that and change my life. It really is that they have to be ready for it. And I think just the sincerity of our love for them can go a long way, but combining with that respect that it's their life, that they are the one holding the steering wheel in the car, and we are now in, the shotgun position, or maybe even backseat, or maybe even you feel like you're just standing on the sidewalk shouting as they drive by. But
and that you trust them to find their solution, right?
Yeah, and to allow things to go badly for them if that's how it's going to turn out. And that is often like one of the best teachers. It certainly has been for me. And I trust that that's going to be the same, for my kids, as much wisdom as we want to impart to them so that they can avoid the suffering. There's a song, maybe Erik can remember the name of the musical. I always forget, but it says one of the things that we love the most is to make our own mistakes.
It's actually it's Children of Eden, and it's the story. It's the creation story, and it's God talking about Adam and Adam not wanting to listen to his dad. And so the song is the thing that, or actually, no, I think, and then act one is the story of God and Adam. And then act two is the story of Adam and his children. And so, and Adam has learned that, oh, our kids, the thing that they really want to do is they want to make their own mistakes. They want to learn things the hard way. I mean, they don't want the pain, but they also don't want your help.
Isn't that just one of the truest things? And I think if we can accept that, when my kids were young, I used the love and logic parenting model. And that, in a nutshell, was basically you let them make their choices. And as a parent, you would set up options for them that you felt comfortable with. And then whatever their choice was, they had to live with those consequences. So you don't want to clean your room, then I'll clean it for you, but you don't get $1 of your allowance or whatever it was. And they got choices. So they got to see responsibility and consequence and that type of thing. But I find that it's a lot harder when they're adults because the choices they're making can have super big impact on their lives. If you're going to drink and drive, you're going to end up in jail. You're going to end up without your license. You're going to end up hurting somebody. Like, what do you do with, the big things? If you're going to drop out of school, this is going to put your life on a different trajectory. Like, these are big things that you want them to hear. But I'm also starting to see that after years of living with certain consequences, they have felt enough pain to shift things. Do you know what I mean?
And I'll say, I think there's a difference between somebody that's doing something illegal that can genuinely physically hurt other people. I'm all about prevention in those areas. Take the keys away from somebody who shouldn't be driving drunk or high.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or if there's violence happening, absolutely, protect the innocent, things like that. But when it comes to things like, I want to change my major, or do I want to go to college at all, or I don't want to have a job, or, those things, I feel like it's letting them suffer is maybe the most loving thing we can do, because if we're always protecting them from the consequences of their actions, then they never get the benefit of learning the lesson that they need to learn. And we're just protracting the pain by trying to insulate them. Whereas if we'll just let it go straight at them, in a way, we're helping them get to the solution quicker and more effectively. And so sometimes...
So true.
Yeah.
It's painful for us to watch that, but you really have to logically go into that place of, this is going to be the best way for them. They want to have this experience. They want to make this choice. They need to know what that means for them.
I think sometimes we're trying to protect our own heart, the pain that we feel watching them suffer. And if we can just let that go and let them have their own experiences, then first of all, our suffering is optional. We get to choose how we feel, and they get to go through the journey that they need to go through, hopefully quicker, because we're not trying to drag things out for them.
See, this is the joy of parenting, figuring out the fine lines, right? When do we hurt?
I think sometimes it goes back to what Erik was saying earlier about the first step in getting on your kids' board of directors is really having some things that you're excited about in your own life and building that credibility by saying, oh, here's things that I want to do. This is the kind of person that I want to be. And I am making efforts in that direction. And the reason I think that can be helpful on this other side of the coin is that we don't then get so caught up in our child's life that we sometimes mistake it for our life, or we mistake it as a reflection of our parenting, right? Oh, if I let my child go out in the world making those kind of decisions, what are other people going to think about me? What are they going to think of my parenting? And I felt this really strongly when we, in 2007, started a homeschool journey, which we don't need to get into that. It wasn't really on my radar of things to do, but it became apparent that was going to work for our family. But I was pretty terrified about the prospect. I thought I was going to be sacrificing my whole self. And then pretty soon I realized, well, first of all, it helped me grow a lot because I felt even more motivated to set the example in multiple areas. say, oh, I want to show them what writing actually looks like. So I'm going to try to get some articles published, which I did. But I did feel this other people's opinion pressure when they would find out we were doing something different. And then they would start asking my kids math questions. If your kid goes to public school, does anyone say, oh, where do you go? Okay, can you answer me these multiplication problems? No, they do not do that. But my kids got asked these kind of things all the time, just to sort of a public test of whether or not, they were getting a good education. And when our daughter with Down syndrome was born and she was diagnosed, I realized, oh, she's going to have a different journey, and we're just going to try to nurture and support her and see what her gifts are and what her interests and strengths are. And then it was a real light bulb moment. And I was like, what if I did that for all of my other kids too, instead of trying to push them to reach other people's milestone expectations as a validation of me as a person. And what a relief, right? What a relief for me, and what a relief for them. And that also was definitely part of the foundation of staying connected with them, is because it changed our relationship to the point where I was like, I'm here to nurture you with this buffet of opportunities, and your part is to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what direction you want to go, and what you love, and what you're curious about. And that was a much better place to come from than you have to get X, Y, and Z done by Thursday because your teacher said, or else your grade, and then this. And so just one example about, we did have one daughter who was talking about dropping out. And in New York City, she only had to go to school through age 16 legally. And she's like, well, I want to make an album, or I want to do these other things. And I didn't push back on her. I liked what you said earlier, Lori, about kind of helping them see the consequences. We sort of talked through where the different paths might lead. And I said, why don't you drop out of school? Why don't you record a whole album? You're an amazing songwriter. Like, if that's what you want to do, we always told them, if you can take an unconventional path, it will just require a lot more effort than a conventional path, but you can definitely do it. And so she kind of walked through it, and she decided that she wanted to continue on her current path. She continued on homeschooling through high school and went to college and graduated, and has done something a little bit more traditional, but she continued to write songs and record them and play them. And, she's playing with the idea of maybe an album now, but I didn't say, you can't do that. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? I kind of rolled with her, and I tried to stay on the same side of the table as her and say, like, okay, well, what would that look like? What excites you about that?
I love the wisdom. I love the wisdom, Emily, of this is your journey, of looking at each of your kids like that. I just want to restate that, because that might be one of the most powerful things we've talked about, recognizing each child from their whole life through. This is your journey. And there's a principle of stewardship versus ownership that comes into this also, right? Stepping back and kind of watching. And like you say, how can I nurture? How can I support? But also realizing this is their experience and they get to navigate it. And letting that help us as parents to not have to not misconstrue things, to not take on more than is our responsibility or is helpful. And also, because we talk about stories all the time, like you say, you're the hero of your story, or let's shift to a better story. But if this is your story, you don't get to tell your kids how to write it. You get to watch and see, what do they create? This is their journey. That's very powerful.
Well, I love your metaphor of the story. And so maybe in context, it would be like Erik would say, the first thing we do is to live our best story that we know how, and overcome our obstacles with optimism and persistence. And obviously we can allow ourselves a little grief, but then get up and move forward. And I wish I could give you the exact reference. I'm sure anyone could Google this, but the studies have shown that when kids know the stories of their parents and their grandparents, when the family story is that there have been ups and downs, and that we just keep moving forward, it actually generates resilience in our kids. And so then when they recognize, hey, I'm the hero of my own story, My parents are now only minor characters, hopefully in my story.
I've read that research too, and I've always thought that was really powerful. It stuck with me as well. Erik, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to add on to this idea of living your own best story as a parent, because I think there's the nagging parent that's always trying to like tell your kids what to do or remind them about their chores or homework or things like that, or other kinds of nags that apply to adult life. But I also think there's the temptation as your kids launch out and have their own lives to be the needy parent. Hey, you don't ever come and visit me anymore. I never get to see my grandkids, or you never call. And when we're the needy parents of our adult kids, guess who they don't want to hang out with? We don't want to be in those needy relationships. So if we as parents continue to grow and thrive and have our own activities, pursuits, and interests, we don't feel as needy for our kids. And they're like, oh, hey, mom and dad are still doing stuff and they don't need us for validation. They don't need us to feel like they're worthwhile people. And so I guess as an example, we're going camping. Emily and I and the two kids that are at home, we're going camping this coming week. And we just said to our kids, hey, if you guys want to come join us, this is where we'll be. You're welcome to come along. But we didn't be like, hey, we're doing a family camp out. If you're not there, it's just not going to be the same. Where are your priorities? We can be needy, or we can just be on a journey together as adult parents with our adult kids. And guess what? The less needy we are, I think the more they want to spend time with us.
Another beautiful piece of wisdom.
Well, I have one thing to add to that. We don't have to say it in a needy way or a guilt-inducing way, because we know we wouldn't like that. That's actually pretty much just use the golden rule here. But I think it is important for us to invite them and say, I want to spend time with you. Hey, could we get together? Or can you come over? Can I come over? Can we get on the phone? Not in a pushy, guilt-ridden way, but in a way that's saying, I enjoy your company and I'd like to stay connected.
Absolutely. So let's review really quick. Some of the main things we've talked about is, as an adult parent, stay engaged with life. Go on your adventures, keep learning things, be someone that is interesting and can be looked up to. Let them see what that looks like. And then the concept of, I believe in you. I am here as a support. I believe that you have that, how'd you say it, Erik, that internal or eternal seed of greatness.
Divine potential. Yeah.
Thank you. Divine potential that's going to guide you. And I believe that you can solve your problems, instead of coming in with the solution being, I believe that you can. And then if they ask, like Emily was talking about, they ask for advice, not the unsolicited stuff. If they ask, then you can share your experiences. Also, we talked about overcoming obstacles together. So that gives us an opportunity to grow and experiencing things, for them to know that we have their back, or to give them the chance to serve, whatever those obstacles look like. There's growth there. And then the advice, being careful how we talk to them, not being needy, not giving the unsolicited advice, all of those things. What have I missed? What else do you want to leave us with for how to be on our adult children's board of directors?
I'll just say this, going back to what Emily said at the very beginning about that 100-year life grid. Mm-hmm. And I think, Emily, we've got a link to that if people ever want to download that, don't we?
I think so. We could definitely forward it to Lori if she wants to include it in her show notes.
If you want to put that in the show notes. But I'll say this, when we do that and you look at it, you realize that if you live to the age of 80, 90, 100, the years that you are an adult parent vastly outnumber the years of being a parent of kids. And so this is a space worth looking at, considering, and getting good at it, because you're going to be there a lot longer than you were in toddlers, babies, toddlers, elementary school, teenagers. You're going to spend decades in this space. And if you can enjoy it and enjoy those years with your kids, it's going to be a lot of good years.
This is one of the things we can keep learning and growing in, right? Back to
absolutely.
Well, we have to, because it's always changing. I would just say, if you're in a position where your kids are still at home, you can start planting these seeds. I started taking my kids out on one-on-one dates because I didn't want it to be weird once they grew up to suddenly be like, do you want to get lunch? But also, if you're not in that position and your kids are already grown up, you can always say, you can imagine what it is you'd like your relationship to be like and share with them. I'd love for this to be, more easy and comfortable I'd love to be a part of your life so I can be a support and cheer you on. And I've done XYZ in the past, but I'd love to see it going this way going forward. What would you like to see? What do you want more from me or less from me to feel my love and support? I want to make adjustments that make this, a relationship that we both look forward to because we have, hopefully all of these years. I guess my final thing is just to say, like, it is never too late.
And open that inquisitive conversation, because they do want to be heard and they do want to be understood. Some of them, that's the deepest thing they would love, is to be understood. So having that safe space to listen and not judge, which is sometimes hard with parenting. Gosh, that could be a whole nother topic we get into.
Could I add one more thing here? Because I heard this just in the past year and it really helped me a lot. It was that even if you did your best as a parent, it's okay if your child needed more than your best. It's okay to be able to say, I did my best for you. And they can still say, well, that wasn't enough for me. I did my best for you. And I wish that had been enough. I'm glad you're finding the other resources that you need, because just because we do our best doesn't mean they have to accept that as like, okay, well, in that case, my feelings aren't hurt and my needs were actually met. It's okay to give ourselves a little grace that maybe we aren't going to fill in every need that our child might have. There's nothing wrong with us. No one person is going to do that. That's why we call it the board of directors. We get to be some of the people, and hopefully there will be multiple people that throughout their lives, your adult kids feel that they can turn to. You just want to be some of those people.
I'll just share this real quickly as we end. My personal example is my son will come back and say, oh, well, this happened in my childhood and this happened in my childhood. And if you hadn't said this or it hadn't happened that way, then I wouldn't have had all these experiences, of shame or guilt or whatever. And the truth is I intentionally parented. I had intention with the books that they read, the movies I brought into the house, the Love and Logic, all of those things. So I was absolutely doing the best that I could the whole time, but that his interpretation had been painful to him in some way. There was no way I could have known that as a parent. And if I could go back and, rephrase or do something that would shift that, of course we would. But it's parenting just sometimes is a messy business. And if we're doing the best that we can, there comes a point where, I just said to him, that's the job of each of us to spend the rest of our adult life trying to work through whatever we didn't get from our parents. And everybody has to do it on their own. I can't do it for you. I can't make it better. It was your interpretation of things. And I have to work through what harmed me from my upbringing or what I didn't think I had enough of or whatever it was. And you get to have that opportunity too.
I think that's a great answer. And honestly, if you had parented in a different way, he probably would have found some other way to be hurt or offended, And so I really love something that J.K. Rowling says on the topic. Basically, it's that there's an expiration date on blaming your parents. And for me, that expiration comes when you recognize that you're saying, oh, my parents did this and this, what I feel quote unquote wrong or wasn't right for me. Great. That is your moment of awakening and discovery and taking power to start meeting your own needs. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And I have a daughter who is such a lovely, charming, delightful woman. And she always had wished that she had a big collection of princess dresses and accessories and wonderful things. And I was a tomboy growing up, and that's not my strength set. And I didn't really realize how important it was to her. We obviously had dress ups and things. But now she's a grown woman and she has her own job and her own money, and she treats herself like a princess, and she buys the things that she thinks are beautiful, and she manages her finances, So I always say to her, like, I'm so happy for you that you are fine, that you are able to take care of yourself the way that you always hoped that I would take care of you. And for some reason, because we have an open conversation about that, like, I'm cheering her on. I'm happy for her. I don't feel guilty that I am who I am, like,
yes,
but I can also say, like, I'm glad you're getting what you need, and I see how happy it makes you, and I'm happy for you.
Fun to watch her develop into herself and what that looks like. So as we end this episode, Tell us what you guys are up to. You're doing some sailing trips. You're doing some coaching. What does that look like for you guys now?
Yeah, so we are having a lot of fun taking people sailing in destinations around the world. We're doing several trips, on average about one each month. We're going to Greece, we're going to Thailand. I was just in Mexico. We're going to the Bahamas. And so if people want to learn more, you can just go to our website, theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing 2024 to get the rundown on all of our trips. And we're always open to coaching. We do one-on-one coaching with moms and dads about all these topics that we've discussed. And we're also offering a class specifically on people who want to live on sailboats. That's kicking off. And so we can send you a link that you can put in the show notes for that.
Yeah, I wish I could say more about our book, Double Return Parenting, How to Get on Your Kids' Board of Advisors. I feel like it's 3/4 of the way there. We're still working on that. And yeah,
that's fun. I didn't know that was in the works.
Yeah.
That'll be great. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom. And in the show notes, I will have the links to all of their stuff. You have a podcast, you have the sailing trip. So we'll have the links to the website. Anything else?
The 100-year life grid. If anybody wants to make one, again, it's never too late. We'll give you a link for that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thanks
much.
Thanks
for having us on.
I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. There's so much wisdom from those two. Please share this episode with someone who has adult kids, and let's all work together. Let's share the love of helping one another navigate the tough stuff, the stuff we haven't done before. In this case, how to parent adult children, right? We haven't done it before, so we get to learn how. Join us in 2 weeks for a quick chat after each interview. The next episode is a quick chat, which is one inspirational idea in 15 minutes or less. And have a great week, creating your life with intention, creating your best life story.